Why couldn't Haymitch save Panem? He won his Hunger Games, where there were twice as many tributes. He also had the help of Plutarch and other tributes in the arena who were willing to fight back. And he even mentored Katniss and Peeta. So why couldn't he be the face of it? After reading Sunrise on the Reaping and digging deeper into the trauma and the psychology of each character, it's clear that Haymitch didn't fail to save Panem. He didn't even get a chance to save Panem. From the moment he won, the Capitol made sure that he'd never be seen as anything but broken, drunk, and garbage. When I talk about before the reaping, I don't even mean during the reaping itself. I literally mean before he even stepped foot, before it was even his birthday. The thing is, he has a mother, he has a brother, and he has his girlfriend. I'm using clips from the ballad because there's no movie yet, so deal with it. Lenore Dove, who is President Snow's second cousin. You see how President Snow's ex and Lenore Dove, they're related. Cousins. Lenore Dove was dangerous to Haymitch because number one, she's openly rebellious to the Capitol. On Reaping Day, she sang a rebellious song, physically resisted a peacekeeper during the Reaping event where one of the male tributes had actually ran off the square and died because of a peacekeeper. She was going to get killed by a peacekeeper trying to get her off, but instead of that, Haymitch came in to rescue her, and as a result, he was put as the replacement for the male tribute. Already, he's being roped into the games. President Snow knows about this whole situation, right? He has his eyes on everything. This event, even though it stopped broadcasting to the other districts and to the Capitol, of course it was still being shown to President Snow, right? The fact that he was so closely connected to Lucy Gray, and also the fact that he was connected to Lenore Dove, which if you know from the Ballad of Songbird and Snake, Lucy Gray was pretty rebellious. Her being rebellious and then Lenore Dove being related, it's kind of expected that Lenore Dove would embody the same ideologies and the same traits as Lucy Gray. You know, it just runs in the DNA, runs in the blood. No matter what rebellious action he's planning to do, it's already being watched by President Snow very closely because President Snow knows the thoughts that have been placed into his mind by Lenore Dove, how powerful the Baird family's words can be. Besides the fact, even if Lenore was like a random person, right? The fact that Haymitch has a loved one, his girlfriend that he loves really deeply and is willing to sacrifice his livelihood for, it makes Snow be able to use that to his advantage and use that for blackmail. If you don't comply, there's no other choice but to kill the people closest around you. It just already puts a target on his back for him to be easily controlled, to be forced into compliance, to protect him and his family and Lenore Dove. He was being punished before the games even began just because of his connection to somebody deemed rebellious. So you could see that this sets him on a different trajectory than Katniss, because Katniss, while her reaping defiance, it was public, but it was certainly broadcasted. The cameras were cut for Haymitch as soon as the event happened, so nobody really knows what Haymitch had done or his first real rebellious or courageous act. But in another case, Katniss, right, her volunteering for Prim was broadcasted widely for everybody to see. But even though it was within the rules to volunteer, volunteering for somebody in District 12 is a sign of care and a sign of somebody who cares about actually not about herself, who's not being selfish, and that's really what people look for in a leader. Haymitch just didn't have a chance to show that to the rest of the districts, to show his selflessness. Now that they've been reaped and now they're going to the Capitol, just as a reminder, there's twice as many tributes this time. So there's 2 male tributes and there's 2 female tributes because of the quarter quell. Before the games could begin, before he could even get to know his teammates or the other tributes, they were doing the chariot thing. The chariot incident is also another opportunity where Haymitch could have really made a difference, but he didn't. Haymitch witnessed Luella's horrific death. People during the early Hunger Games didn't like District 12 because it was the epitome of district. You have the career districts, the rich district, District 1 and 2. Poor districts like District 12 really embody the term their district because people think of them as subhuman. Before Haymitch could even really get to know the other tribute, they had to do the chariot ride shown in front of all the Capitol audience. And during that time, as people were throwing tomatoes and like throwing food, one guy threw a lit firework underneath the chariot, and that proceeded to explode the chariot and kill Luella, a 13-year-old girl, comparable to Rue. What Haymitch decides to do is grab Luella and run to the front of the podium and lay the body in front of President Snow as if to say, this is your fault, but not only is this your fault, there's also tons of kids who have also died at the hands of you. In a normal scenario, this event would be horrific to see, right? Like if you were to see this on your own phone while you were watching TV, of course you would feel horrified. As soon as the firework even exploded, the cameras were already cut. So at this point, who is this for? It's not for any of the districts. So the districts can't even see this act of defiance against the Capitol. Really, the only people who can see are like the people out front and President Snow. So all Haymitch has really done is told President Snow, I'm a rebellious person. I will try to take down the Capitol at any cost. Obviously, Snow is not going to take it well. You're having zero impact on the districts. You're basically telling on yourself to President Snow. But you contrast this with Katniss. Her act of defiance, I guess you could say, is when Rue died. She really took care of Rue, put flowers around her, and treated her as a human being, not just some video game character that just happened to die. It carried a lot more emotional weight. Since it was more emotional and it wasn't rebellious, at least to the Capitol did live stream to everybody. People didn't take it well. It's one thing to see all these tributes going, again, the cannons firing, but then you physically see it, somebody taking gentle care. It brings a lot more empathy into the viewers, especially the district, that these are real people and like we can't let this keep happening. But the cameras didn't cut then, so the districts were able to see that. And same thing with the berry incident. There were only 2 people left in the arena. They had to broadcast that part where they were about to eat the berries despite there only being 1 victor left. So technically you're still playing by the rules. They left them no choice but to broadcast that scene. And while to the Capitol it was seen as like a love story, to the districts it's clear that we no longer want to play by the rules of the Capitol. The system of the Hunger Games and having a reaping every year is something that can be changed and doesn't have to happen each year. Because it was shown to people, it wasn't censored, so people could get the message and people could actually unite under one cause and start a rebellion. But Haymitch's act of rebellion, trying to flood the entire arena with water, was immediately censored. They can choose not to broadcast that. How can you root for somebody that you don't even know about? Cameras tell a much more different story than real life, even though it's being technically live streamed. And we also know that he attempted to blow up the arena, which was also not shown. And the only thing that was really made it into like the final edit was really Haymitch acting as if he was acting selfishly, and the only thing he wanted to do was to survive and didn't care about anybody else but himself. About this, you're a viewer and you see a guy who is on a killing spree and who really does not care about other people, clearly is in favor of the Capitol by not being shown any of the rebellious acts he's done. How could you stand behind him in a rebellion? You don't even know his stance on the Capitol, so how can you rebel with him if you don't even know him properly? And then that leads us to Plutarch, because Plutarch is somebody who we think is like heavily associated with the Capitol, but then ends up being one of the biggest supporters for the rebellion cause. I think he learned from Haymitch's time. He tried to help Haymitch start the rebellion by giving him tools and information to tell him, you should destroy this water tank at this location. It's so interesting to see Plutarch's actions after Haymitch's games, because he cut ties immediately with Haymitch after Haymitch's attempt to destroy the arena failed. Talk about some isolation there. You think the only person who's trying to root for you and to try to start a rebellion has like completely moved on to the next and really just gave up on your cause. That's pretty disheartening. I think Plutarch learned from his experience of seeing the immense amount of suppression that the Capitol could do and how powerful censorship and editing can really do to affect the district's minds, how propaganda is so important. You can see that in Mockingjay, how important Plutarch sees the role of propaganda to help aid the rebellion cause. Plutarch was definitely more strategic during Katniss's games, and he was really focusing on creating emotional moments that the the capital would really like have a hard time to fight against, because you can't really fight against the emotions that people feel for another person. And we can also see in the support system, he made changes to that too. In the 75th Hunger Games, Plutarch really tried to, first of all, make the games so that it was all the victors, and also make them like work with each other to keep each other alive and to actually break the arena. It's just about the support system. Haymitch during his games was all alone. He really couldn't do anything. For the first time in Katniss's games, instead of people fighting tributes against tributes, it was now tributes against the capital. But in Haymitch's games, it was still tribute against tributes. It's recognizing the true enemy to be Snow and not other districts.
Remember who the real enemy is.
And that leads to the aftermath. At the last moment, Haymitch had made a last-ditch effort to use the arena as a way to kill the career tribute, and also try to explode the arena by tossing in a bomb outside of the arena. He won his games, but it didn't equal to a widespread rebellion and a new Panem. So why? It's because he faced the consequences of his earlier defiances. Again, the capital trying to suppress any of that. And what's the best way to suppress him? It's fear. On his way home during his victory tour, throughout the book, he's saying President Snow just gives him a cold smile. President Snow doesn't need to give anything else. He knows he can kill Haymitch's family at any time, and Haymitch knows that Lenore Dove is in some serious trouble, especially given Lenore Dove's rebellious history, you know? Like, she's already on thin ice. The ice is breaking. After the games, it was almost like he was in survival again. He didn't care what he said on TV as long as it could make his family and his girlfriend Lenore Dove safe. So of course, during all the interviews, the parties with the capital people, by the way, this is not the victory tour. The victory tour is a bit later. When he's coming back, of course he would say anything to pretend like he's with the capital. There's nothing more that he can do. I think he already saw that the rebellion was not what he planned it to be, and these attempts at trying to go against the capital were just never gonna work in his favor. The last ditch attempt he made to save Lenore Dove ultimately failed because President Snow already reached his objective. President Snow already has learned if he can just get Haymitch to act nice and act pretty well in front of the cameras and in front of the capital residents, then that's all he really needs. After this year, everybody's gonna forget about Haymitch and then move on to the next victim. Ultimately, we see all of these deaths around him when he finally comes home and hopes that all of his family is safe. As soon as he steps off the train, his mother and his brother die right in front of him. And when he goes to talk to Lenore Dove, she dies by eating her favorite snack, which is like bubble gums. When Haymitch gets help from Amper to destroy the water barrier, Amper dies. And same thing with Maisley. Maisley is from his own district, and when they're banded together, you know, when they're a team, as soon as Maisley goes out of sight from him, she dies. It's all this guilt because you, with all these people who are dying at your hands, you think it's your fault, even though it's technically Snow's. Of course it's Snow's fault to actually kill these people. It feels like with how directly correlated it is with his actions and their deaths, it's so heavily put, the blame is so heavily put on him for these deaths. It's clear, the message is clear. If you don't comply with what I say, you will be served with loss. And that just really contributed how he got into drinking and how he became an alcoholic. And the thing is, nobody even saw these deaths. Nobody even saw these deaths as part of a greater whole to defeat the capital. Not even people from his own district knew about it. The only people who know about the truth is President Snow and Haymitch, and that's just for him to keep. But you know, again, we go back to Katniss. Her trauma and her loss are shared by the rest of the districts. Everything is broadcasted for Katniss's games, and that's a loss that the entirety of Panem experiences. Even her re-reaping into the 75th Hunger Games. It's a sad moment, especially with Haymitch's victory tour, actual victory tour. He was already an alcoholic. You're presented with a guy who is extremely selfish and is currently drunk as he's trying to read off of cue cards, explaining to everybody, I'm sorry for the loss of the people in District 11, District 10, blah, on and on and on. Nobody's going to root for your cause and nobody thinks of you in a good way. But Katniss, during her time when she was going through the victory tour, it was clear she did not want to be there and she really was against the idea of the games and the fact that it was all broadcasted. And even if it wasn't broadcasted in front of these districts, you know, talking talking to Rue and Thresh's family, making a promise to provide for them and to send them portion of their winnings. It really shows how brutal they think the games are. It really speaks to a lot more people than Haymitch's rascal cheater actions ever will. When Snow tries to intercept Katniss, like, you better sell this in love thing or I really will kill all your family. It doesn't matter. Even if he did kill Peeta right in front of Katniss, it doesn't matter anymore, because at that point, Katniss already had the support of everybody in the districts. The cause and the rebellion was greater than her then. It would actually be good if she died, because then she would be a martyr and she would truly just turn on President Snow like that. But it's like, how early do you stop it? Snow's trying to stop any movement in the early stages. It worked for Haymitch, but by the time it was Katniss's time, he just realized way too late. The damage already happened. You can definitely see that Katniss's more subtle approach had definitely worked. It was never coming down to luck. You may say that Prim being reaped was luck, but I think Katniss would have found a way to do this anyways. I think somebody else would have found it in them to do what Katniss did anyways. I think it was just a matter of time and somebody with the knowledge of not being so out there to do it. It's not about luck. Plutarch was finding somebody who had the same characteristics as Haymitch, but did it in a more thought-provoking and a more empathetic way to really go under the radar of the Capitol and of the game makers. And I just want to bring up the topic of loss again, because Lenore Dove actually had a song for herself. It says that it's her song that she made for herself, but it's not. It's a poem by Edgar Allan Poe called The Raven. At first, when Haymitch sings it during the Hunger Games, he's up on a tree and he's singing one verse of the song as a way to say, what will Lenore do when I die? Is she gonna think of me as a person who never is erased from memory and who will forever be haunted in her dreams? It's so ironic because the roles are reversed after Lenore dies, and Haymitch has to struggle with the fact that Lenore will never be wiped from his memory. The poem's about a man who is trying to deal with loss and deal with the grief of a woman named Lenore. He hears a knock at the door, and instead of it being Lenore, it's a raven. The only thing the raven says is nevermore. The guy asks the raven, like, will Lenore ever come back? And the raven only says nevermore to whatever question the man asks. The poem really tells you more about how Haymitch felt about Lenore, how he was constantly reminded of the death of Lenore Dove, and also like how he never truly moves on. And because of the fact that it's repeating, right? You can connect that to the Hunger Games, how it's repeating every year, and every year, because of the reaping, he's reminded of his girlfriend and the loss of the people close to him. It's also strange how Lenore Dove, the last name Dove, is the quite opposite to a raven, right? Like, you think of a dove as peace and hope, but then a raven is ominous and tragic. It represents how the raven really overshadows any peace or happiness that Haymitch could have potentially had after her death. Lenore had once given a purpose for Haymitch to love her, but once she and her family were gone, like, his purpose vanished, got him into more despair, got him more into alcoholism. So honestly, Haymitch won the games, but in any other aspect, it felt he lost to the Capitol's control. Why do you need to know about this? Just looking at Haymitch's life can tell you a lot of things about how you want to plan change or start a movement. To not lead with your own emotions. I think Haymitch is very much led by his grief and by his trauma, but to really think about how you're going to get your message across and how you're going to reach other people. Bye!